Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS-Inform, and in this edition we're going to meet a candidate. This is Andrew Horning. He is a libertarian running for the 8th District U.S. Congress. Mr. Horning, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, thank you.
Well, I remember, just 2 years ago we had you in the studio. We were talking about you running for office in the 8th District. First of all, let's find out a little bit about Andrew Horning. Who is Andrew Horning?
Well, I have a little farm in Freedom, Indiana. I've got 5 kids, and I've been married to the same, well, she's the woman of my dreams. Mm-hmm. And I work in the medical device industry, medical imaging specifically, as a product manager.
Why are you running for 8th District? Why not just run for some small office?
Well, I hate politics. More than anybody I know, I hate politics. And I hate it bad enough I want to chase it down with a stick, find out where it lives, and beat it. Mm-hmm. And that's where, a lot of people hate politics, but they won't do anything about it. And they have all these ideas about the way things ought to be done, but they're not going to do anything about it. And I apparently don't like politics more than they don't like politics, because I really think stuff needs to happen. People need to get active. People who have better ideas for how we should be running the world should be doing just that. They should be getting involved and active.
Now, you're on the Libertarian ticket.
I'm on the Libertarian ticket. Is this a good year for libertarians? Because, the presidential race kind of makes things a little different for people. Yes, I keep hoping. And in this election especially, where you've got Caligula running against Pol Pot, and both of these people lie so much that we don't even know which is which. Mm-hmm. One is pretty much George Bush ideologically speaking, and that's the Democrat. One is Jimmy Carter ideologically speaking, except with a fear aggression syndrome, and that's the Republican. And so you've got this ridiculous setup where we know that these two people are as corrupt as all get out. One of them even brags about his ability with corruption. He's the best corrupter of all time. He's huge in corruption. And we think this is good? And how can people justify, it's usually the case where I have to explain what I'm doing on the ballot. How dare you infect our elections with your presence on the ballot? But this time it's like, how dare you vote for either one of these guys? I mean, they're the ones who have to explain what the heck they're doing on the ballot. How dare they keep doing what we've had this for 100 years now, the same military-industrial complex, the same out-of-control monetary and banking system, the same crony capitalism. For 100 years it's been getting worse and worse and worse. And this is now the choke point where we've, all of this lesser evil voting has led to two really bad candidates. Bad humans, bad candidates. And the fact that voters are arguing about which one of these they're going to vote for, that's the wrong question. When your house is on fire, you don't start, arguing about paint colors and things like that. You put out the fire. We've got a fire in our country. The corruption is so bad, it's so extreme, starting at the precinct level, going up and then back down again, that ought to be our issue.
Well, you're running for Congress, 8th District. What are some changes that you think you can make?
Well, first of all, voters have to elect me. They have to, the first thing that has to happen is voters have to decide, are we okay with this? Are we okay with this same stuff over and over and over, the entrenchment of the same people behind the parties? And I mean, just to be clear here, the people who are running our system are not the people on the ballot, not now. Because we've been voting for all of the crony capitalists, on all of the lobbyists on K Street. The people we have been voting for have been the ones that bought this whole system a long time ago, and they've entrenched themselves in this. So the first thing that has to happen is voters have to tell the two-party system something it hasn't heard in 100 years. No. We have to tell them no. And one thing I want to make clear is that the whole purpose of elections was for peaceful revolution, so we don't need the other kind. And that's what, we're at such a state of corruption and violence and global fear-mongering that we have to do something. This, global game of, whack-a-mole that we're playing with our military-industrial complex, funding both sides of every conflict, and then fighting both sides of every conflict, and the trillions of dollars that we could half our national, statutory debt if we were to just take that money we spent on the war on terror and put it instead, to pay down the debt. Half, we could just wipe it out by half. Now, the fact that we're not doing that is because they're fear-mongering all the time. And voters have been playing this game as though we're the ones who are the tribalists, as though we're the ones who are face-painted and, dancing around our tribal flags. And it's got to stop. It's madness.
Well, we were talking a little bit off the air, and I had mentioned, well, you know, your opponent. And you said, well, really, my opponent is not the incumbent as much as the voters are your opponent, because you've got to get them to think differently.
You put me and Larry Bucshon, you know, in a debate, and if we could talk, he's no opponent. I mean, there's no opponent there. We have different ideas about the way things are going and the way things ought to be. Ideologically speaking, we would say different stuff, but he's part of the system. As much as he might want to change things, and as much as he might want to, you know, do something about corruption, although, you know, you look at his campaign contributions and you see that he doesn't really want to fix that. You know, he's not the problem. He's the one that we've been electing. He's an incumbent. He's been reelected. Once you've reelected somebody, you can't blame the incumbent anymore. You know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me every election day for 100 years. We've got to take responsibility for this. And my only chance at doing anything positive as a congressman is, first of all, if voters realize that this mess we have is here because we made it happen. We chose this. And if we understand that we chose this, then we understand then that we have the power to fix it. So the only shot I've got is to let voters know in some way. I mean, it's difficult to even get to voters because they don't show up to public forums and things. If they understood their power and their accountability, then they would understand, yes, we've been choosing rather badly, and yes, we need to choose different.
Would term limits help some of this?
Yes. You know, I used to be a little bit wishy-washy on term limits because I would think, you know, isn't that what voters are supposed to do? I mean, isn't that the whole point of elections, to fire the bums? But how many people actually think like that? You know, incumbents get reelected 90% over 90% of the time. So, you know, in fact, if you look at the curve, you see when, you know, the approval rates of Congress went down into single digits, there was actually a spike in reelection rates. So what we say as voters and what we do are absolutely opposite. If people would vote the way they talk, I would have already been elected. But we don't. We say one thing, we do another. We calculate odds. And that's a weird one. You know, if you think about, you know, the thing I hear most is, oh, Andy, you don't have a good chance of getting. But, you know, if you come home and you come home for a lunch break, an odd thing, and I'm holding a fire extinguisher, really weird thing. You come home and you find your house is starting to catch on fire. You don't calculate the odds and say, well, gosh, I shouldn't actually be home from work right now. I certainly shouldn't be holding a fire extinguisher, so I guess the odds are my house is going to burn down. I'm going to let it burn. Nobody would do that. You don't calculate odds ever when it comes to really important stuff. You don't do what we do in anything. You don't hire people the way we hire politicians. You don't act the way we do regarding politicians. In other words, flee from any information regarding them. We won't call them. We don't talk to them. You know, we do everything we can to avoid information related to really important stuff. Nobody would do that in anything else. So here we've got a setup where, you know, obviously there's a right and a wrong. Obviously there's big screw-ups, big important things happening. People are dying overseas because of us, needlessly, and most of us know that. And who doesn't know that our government's corrupt? And yet we're voting on odds? You know, this is not a game. It's not like Las Vegas where we're saying, well, gosh, you know, my chances of throwing a 6 are pretty low. Nobody does that. So this is important, and we have to treat it as such.
Do you think people vote sometimes thinking, well, you know, Andrew Horning's never been in office. He's not a politician. He does. When he gets to Congress, he won't know how to act or what to pass. Where somebody else has been there, they know the game.
Yeah,
is that good or bad? That could,
of course, it's bad.
Yeah.
You know,
but for you, that's why they should vote for you.
Well, let's just be serious here. Our government was designed to be for the people. And the whole point of the House of Representatives would be that these people get fired frequently, and you get new guys in there all the time to truly represent, you know, the needs of the district. And if they don't, you fire them. That was supposed to happen. And it was supposed to be simple enough. Our laws are supposed to be few enough so that everybody could know them, simple enough that everybody could understand them, and important enough that they are to be obeyed without exception by everybody. That was how it was supposed to work. But nobody knows all the rules now. We have this system that's built for experts by, you know, you have lawyers as lawmakers, for goodness sakes. If that's not the fox guarding the hen house, I don't know what is. And so you've got this insanely complicated system where cops don't know the rules that they're enforcing. They just make stuff up as they go because nobody can know all the laws. And so we have a system that is so screwed up, top to bottom, that we should be looking at, let's wipe this and start over. Let's go back to the constitutions and trim off everything that doesn't fit the constitutional authorization and go from there, because that was the agreement originally. That was what the states decided. We can tolerate this central government as long as it stays on its side of the fence. And people in Indiana decide, all right, with this state constitution, we can tolerate a state government as long as it stays on its side of the fence. But all of those fences are down. Everything is transcended, morality, legality, everything is topsy-turvy screwed up, and we all know it. And yet we're going to vote for it again? I mean, if that isn't madness, I don't know what is.
So really, you are the alternative. And does it bother you to be thought of as the alternative?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, if you think of me as a revolutionary, that's great.
Okay.
A peaceful revolution is what we need, and that's the whole point of elections. And so when you're talking about who's qualified to be, in this office or not, I would say that somebody who's been in the office for, more than a couple of terms is corrupt. I mean, chances are good. I mean, there are people that have avoided corruption rigorously. So you think like Ron Paul, who would not even go out to lunch with lobbyists, but those people are rare. Most people, and I'm not even saying that, I'm incorruptible. If I go to, I'm going to try to do some things like right off the bat, term limits, that kind of stuff, right off the bat, because I'm human. Who can't be seduced by money, power, security, all those things that, you look to see the revolving door between the regulators and regulated, where the people who go into regulatory agencies suddenly become lobbyists for those regulatory, regulated industries. And you've got people who, go from Congress to K Street within a year after, they decide, oh, no, I'm not going to run for office again. What is that all about? And if you look to see that these guys raise millions of dollars for a job that lasts 2 years and doesn't even pay a quarter of what it costs to get that job to begin with, look at how much money is being involved in this. And who is really doing this? Who is really pumping all this money in? There are people that are investing, and they get a good investment. So you have these large corporations that they'll give you $1 million, but they get billions back. And you can follow the numbers, but who does that? Do voters ever do that? The only time we look at numbers, the only time we look at odds is when we say, well, gosh, Andy, you don't have good odds of getting elected, so I can't vote for you. Come on, guys, that's nuts.
This could be a good year for you. I hate to do this, but we are running out of time. So, what would you like to tell the voters? I mean, we talked about corruption is probably the biggest issue, you think.
It's the root of all other issues.
Okay, because everything else we talk about, it really comes back to that corruption. But I'm going to give you a few minutes, to say what you'd like to the voters.
All right. So, if you looked at my, I have a blog site at wedeclare.wordpress.com. I've got a website at Horning for Congress with the number 4, Horning for Congress. I've got a Facebook page. If you Google Andy Horning, you're going to find more information about me than either of the other candidates, by far. I've been writing about stuff for years. So if you have any issues that you want to know about what I think about gay marriage or military-industrial complex, banking, I've written about all this stuff. So it's easy to find out what I say specifically, but more importantly, before we get to any of that, we have to deal with the corruption. And the only way to deal with the corruption is elect me. I've got to get there before we can address the corruption that starts at the precinct level and goes all the way up and then comes right back down again. Because Democrats, Republicans have been writing themselves special laws, special exemptions, have been granting themselves taxpayer money for too long, and we have to bust that up.
And Andrew Horning offers that option.
I do. I put that on the ballot.
All right. Andrew Horning, running for 8th District U.S. Congress. He's on the Libertarian ticket. General election, you can go in and vote for one office, or you can vote for all the offices. Just make sure that you go out and vote. That's the key thing. And early voting is going on, so get out and vote. It's a pleasure having you here again, Mr. Horning.
Good to talk to you again.
And good luck with the election.
Thank you.
Our guest has been Andrew Horning. He is running for 8th District for U.S. Congress. I'm Bill Potter, thanking you for watching our Inform Meet the Candidate series here on WJTS. Local people watching local people.